people. Saying they're going to do it is a much different thing than being able to do it. It's a very narrow strip of water. There are concerns about mines. So that is less clear as to what the Pentagon's objective is when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz.
Going now to the White House, our chief U.S. correspondent, Alan Fisher, is there. Alan, the U.S. signaling, and we heard it from Haig yesterday, we heard it from Trump, they are signaling that this war begins and ends with the U.S. president.
And the advice he gets from his military advisors. Look, Donald Trump, over the last 24 hours, has sent out messages about how long this war is going to last. Late yesterday afternoon, he called a reporter and said that they were very complete, pretty much, as far as the war was concerned. The timing of that was important because what it did was stabilize the markets, both the price of oil and also on shit as well. So that wasn't a coincidence. And then he had a news conference when he said that if Iran decided to block the Straits of Hormuz, was going to hit them harder than they've ever hit them before, which would indicate that this war isn't over. Now, he was also asked, is it likely that the war will end this week? And he said, no, but pretty soon. Donald Trump has been flexible with deadlines in the past. They don't actually mean a great deal. He will make the decision. The decision is definitely in his gift. He's got to listen to military advisors. But he's also got to think about the PR of this. He's got to be able to declare a win. He's got to show what they actually achieve. Now, regime change right at the start, that clearly isn't happening at the moment. They still hope that somehow they might be able to ferment some form of revolution. He thinks that they have destroyed the Navy, the Air Force, and have air superiority over Iran. That's probably close to being true, and that they won't pose a threat outside their borders anytime soon. But he's got to try and sell, as Patty was saying, that to the American people. And at the moment, they're simply not buying it. You look at the opinion polls, only 30% of people support the war. And if there was troops on the ground, the disapproval rate goes up to more than 60%. So this is a very fine line for Donald Trump to walk.
Patty, back to you.
Wow.
You mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. Alan mentioned as well. It, of course, is directly tied to oil prices because 20% of the world's oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz, and right now ships aren't going through because, I mean, one can understand intuitively, because of the risk involved and because it's right in the middle of the war zone. Hegseth and the head of the U.S. Armed Forces, General Dan Kane, were asked about this. What did they say about Trump's idea of keeping it open by force and with U.S. Navy help if needed?
Well, they said they were going to look at different options and present them to the president, which is slightly unusual because if you talk to anybody who's ever covered the Pentagon, the thing they like to say the most is they have a plan for everything. So the fact that they have not presented that plan, somewhat interesting because it is an incredibly difficult task. And this is, we've seen a big frustration for the U.S. president because, again, it's not just oil, it's fertilizer from that region that is pivotal to American farmers, and they're about to be in planting season. So and it's shipping, all kinds of shipping. It impacts the entire global supply chain. So looking at ways they could do it, the president has said, well, we'll insure ships because insurance companies have simply said, we're not going to insure you if you go through there, that the U.S. military is going to escort those ships that could potentially put American sailors in harm's way. I mentioned mines earlier. That has been a huge concern for the Pentagon. They were trying to attack the facilities that house those mines in the early days. But as far as there's been a lot of talk about America making sure that the Strait of Hormuz is open, but as of yet, we haven't seen really any action.
Patty Culhane, Alan Fisher at the White House, thank you very much to both of you. Let's head to Ramallah now. Noor O'Day is there. Noor, you're covering the Israeli side of things. What have they been saying about how this war ends and who ends this war?
Well, there are two things happening at the same time, Cyril. On the one hand, no Israeli official is going to cross Donald Trump when he says that the war could end soon. Having said that, the Israeli narrative and messaging to the Israeli public is very, very different. where the U.S. administration is not really talking about regime change toppling the government, Benjamin Netanyahu and his officials are, and they're talking about this war taking as long as it takes. Now, in order not to sound like they're contradicting a very important ally, one without whom this war could not be proceeding, what we're hearing now is that the Israeli government will approve an extension of the state of emergency until the 26th of March. That's an indication that Israel is planning for the long haul. They will be increasing the defense budget by about $13 billion. And already Israelis are filing for compensation, about 10,000 requests so far, nearly half of them from Tel Aviv. So that tells you that enough damage is being done for Israelis to begin asking for compensation, for the government to need extra budgeting. But Benjamin Netanyahu has made it very clear this is the chance of a lifetime for Israel. They will continue to do this. They will continue to pound Iran until they can create the conditions for ending the Islamic Republic in Iran, ending the control of the current government. We heard from senior military sources in Israel already talking about tonight being one of the most decisive in the war so far. The idea is that Israel will create as much damage as it can so long as the U.S. will continue in this war effort.
Nora Day in Ramallah, thank you very much. Let's bring in now our guest, Andreas Krieg. Andreas is an associate professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College London. Andreas, good to have you on the program. This is day 11 of the war. The U.S. and Israel, each time they give a public briefing, they project absolute confidence. And, I mean, they seem to be almost giddy at how well they feel their military campaign is going. What is your assessment?
Obviously, the Pentagon gives briefings on the operations and how the operations are being conducted and how they unfold. Hegseth is supposed to be, as the secretary, he's supposed to be the link between operations and strategy, and he's obviously has a very tactical mindset. Clearly, his speech was very much about tactical achievements, operational achievements, nothing about strategy, nothing about how these operational achievements will be tied into a bigger, broader strategy. And that's the problem that is missing here. That's the part that's missing, is how do you translate these operational successes into a political outcome that is better for the region, that's better for Iran, better for the Gulf, and also better for the United States. And that question has not been answered so far. And so that's kind of where we stand at the moment. So from a tactical point of view, a lot of success. The U.S. operations are unfolding as planned, very successfully as predicted. The problem with this is it's actually creating more anxiety, more anger, and more will to resist within Iran. And so instead of breaking the will, which is what you're trying to achieve strategically, you're reinforcing the Iranian regime and their willingness to particularly lash out at their partners in the Gulf. So in many ways, the key questions still remain unanswered.
Well, okay, let me push you a little bit on this, because I think many viewers will be thinking the following. Both the U.S. and Israel are countries that have shown in the past they are masterful at the tactics. They can win almost any battle, destroy almost any target, find and hunt down almost any enemy. We've seen it time and time again. We've seen it every day in the past 11 days. Okay. Both of those countries have also shown that when it comes to day after thinking, when it comes to greater strategy, thinking of second and third order consequences of what happens in a certain part of the world, including this one, when they start a conflict, they're not so good at that. So are you saying we're seeing the same thing again?
It's what Israel has been doing, and now the Americans have been sucked into that sort of approach, is military-centric, force-centric. It's about delivering force. It's about degradation. It's about attrition, which costs a lot of money, by the way, and this is another problem. But so far has been sustainable in terms of blood lost on the side of the Americans. The problem is it has to be tied into a political outcome, and that's where diplomacy comes in. That's where economic levers of power come in, and this is when you actually develop a narrative for victory, which America is fundamentally lacking. There is no narrative for how victory looks like, and for the Iranians it's quite simple. As long as they don't lose, they win. And if America doesn't win, it will lose. It's as simple as that. And so in this kind of context of where two sort of wills clash with one another, if you're unable to actually articulate your narrative for victory, which is the Americans are unable to do, will not win this war. So what we're likely going to see, because it's all about degradation at the moment, is that the Americans hope they can dictate the terms of saying, now we've degraded enough, we can pull out, we've won. I don't think that the Iranians will allow them to do that. So ultimately, you will need to get the Iranian regime or
What
what's
does that
left of
mean?
it on
That's a
side.
question I tried to ask earlier. The ARGC have said, hey, we decide when this war ends. What does that actually mean? That would mean that potentially Donald Trump writes a post on Truth Social, as he did last year in June, saying the war's now over, we're going to stop attacking Iran, you have to stop Israel, you have to stop. And in that scenario, the IRGC would keep firing?
Last year, the last day when Qatar was attacked in June 2025, Qatar was keeping the channels open. There was intense diplomacy all night during the day to get the Iranians on site. At the moment, this has been unsuccessful. The Iranians have not been willing to bend on this. So my point is, it wasn't Trump putting it on Truth Social to kind of create the victory. The victory was created by the mediator through diplomatic engagement. And that has not happened so far, and it's been very unsuccessful at the moment. So the problem that Trump ultimately has is that the escalation dominance that he thinks and military thinks they have is an illusion. The escalation dominance lies with the Iranians, and not necessarily vis-a-vis Israel and the US, but vis-a-vis the partners in the Gulf. None of what we've heard today actually addresses the massive elephant in the room. What's going to happen to the relationship between Iran and the Gulf? Will they keep on firing at very low cost? What about the Strait of Hormuz? What about energy security? What about the security of supply chains? All of that could potentially be a collateral damage of a longer war. And none of that has anything to do with the sort of tactical achievements that the US military is boasting about.
Andreas, will the US and Israel continue to be on the same page until the end of the war? Because right now their military campaign is being operated with what seems like almost perfect synchronicity, right? They're operating almost as really one broad military. But then when it comes to ending the war, Donald Trump at any point in time, and you explained this earlier, could say, look, we have downed their Navy, downed their Air Force, we've hit all their missile manufacturing capabilities and drones. As far as we're concerned, it's mission accomplished, we're out, the war's over from our point of view. Would Israel then necessarily be okay with that?
Israel is probably the most resilient in all of it, like the Iranians, equally resilient like the Iranians. I think at the moment the willpower in Israel and Iran is at its height. The vulnerable element to it is the willpower of the Gulf states to sustain this, but what they're going to do about it, and then the willpower of Donald Trump. The cost is rising gradually. We're now at a point of diminishing return. Every single day this war continues, the costs are rising, but you will actually, the benefit that you get from further targeting the Iranian regime will diminish. So in this kind of context, Trump will be the one who to call it quits at some point. And he seems to be quite eager to get to this point. The Israelis might not be happy with it, but they might keep on going, and ultimately they'll have to succumb to whatever the US is saying. But it will be Trump who will try to get out of this war. The Israelis will not say this is mission accomplished, because they can keep it going for quite some time.
Andreas Krieg, thank you very much for joining us on the Al Jazeera News Hour. As always, thanks for your analysis. Emergency teams have been searching through the rubble of a residential building in the Iranian capital, Tehran, after it was hit by a U.S.-Israeli strike on Monday near Risalat Square in the east of the capital. According to state media, about 40 people were killed in that attack. And several new Iranian strikes have targeted the Gulf region. In Bahrain, a residential tower was hit in the Sif district of the capital, Manama. Officials say a 29-year-old woman was killed and 8 people were injured. The UAE and Kuwait say that they've also been intercepting missiles and drones. And Saudi Arabia's civil defense says a drone fell into a residential area in Zulfi. That's a city in the province of Riyadh. Speaking at a press briefing in Doha, Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson warned against any further escalation.
We have warned in Qatar for many years now that escalation left unchecked in the region would lead to catastrophic results. We are at that moment where we are seeing the catastrophic results across the region. Right now, as we speak, you can put a map of the region in front of you, and you will not be able to find a finger-pointing space where escalation is not happening. This is exactly what we have said from day one. This is the biggest I told you so in the history of I told you so's in the world. We have said from day one, left unchecked,